If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my life was a masterpiece of structural engineering. My name is Michael, and at 35, I thought I had built a strong, dependable foundation, both in my career and in my marriage. I run a mid-sized software company that I built from scratch, a world of clean code and logical progressions. My wife, Claire, is a freelance graphic designer with a preternatural knack for transforming abstract ideas into breathtaking art. Together, we had carved out a comfortable, well-appointed life filled with plans, laughter, and what I believed was a profound, unshakable mutual respect. We'd been married for 10 years, and those years hadn't been a seamless, flawless blueprint. What marriage is. But I always thought we had something real, something vital. We weren't just spouses, we were partners. We had routines, a language of inside jokes, and a quiet, steady rhythm that felt durable, even when life threw the occasional curveball. Claire had always been the social one, the vibrant, kinetic force, while I was more introverted, content to spend an evening at home with a book or a complex coding problem. Claire thrived on connection. She had an effortless, incandescent charm, the kind that made strangers feel like they'd known her forever. I admired that about her, her ability to light up a room, to make people feel seen and special. She also had a strong, almost ferocious, creative streak. Her freelancing business was thriving, with clients ranging from scrappy startups to established, blue-chip brands. Watching her work was mesmerizing. She could spend hours sketching, brainstorming, completely immersed in her process, a world away. For the most part, our lives complemented each other perfectly. I handled the logical side, the finances, the long-term planning, the tedious but necessary maintenance of our shared existence. Claire brought the color, the spontaneity, the beauty. It worked. Or at least, I thought it did. And then there was Daniel, my best friend, my brother from another mother, as we used to joke. We'd known each other since college, where we had bonded over late-night study sessions fueled by cheap beer and the shared, terrifying struggle of trying to find our footing in the world. Daniel was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and instantly command its attention. He was tall, athletic, and possessed a charisma that just oozed out of him, effortlessly. He worked in high-end real estate, and his ability to charm clients was the stuff of legend. Over the years, Daniel became a fixture in my life, and by extension, in Claire's. He had been there for our wedding, our housewarming party, our anniversary celebrations. He was a permanent, welcome guest at our table. Claire and Daniel got along well, which I always thought was a blessing. There was never any awkwardness, no forced conversation, no uncomfortable tension. They were friends, just like I was friends with Claire's best friend, Sophie. But now, as I look back through the clear, cruel lens of hindsight, I wonder if I'd missed something. If I had been admiring the beautiful facade of our life, completely oblivious to the hairline fractures that were forming in the foundation. The first hint that things weren't as perfect as they seemed came in a series of subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. Claire started spending more time on her phone, her face illuminated by the cool, blue light of the screen, a small, private smile playing on her lips as she laughed at texts I wasn't privy to. When I'd ask what was so funny, she'd just wave a dismissive hand. "Oh, just Sophie being Sophie," she'd say, or something equally vague and impenetrable. I didn't press. Claire had always valued her privacy, and I respected that. But still, a part of me, a small, quiet, logical part, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Our date nights, once a sacred, weekly ritual, became less frequent. And when they did happen, Claire seemed distracted. She'd check her phone mid-conversation, her eyes flicking down to the screen, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. "Everything okay?" I asked one evening as we sat across from each other at a cozy Italian restaurant, one of our favorite spots. "Yeah," she said, flashing me a smile that was bright, beautiful, and didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a lot on my mind. Work stuff." Again, I let it go. Everyone has their moments, right? Everyone gets distracted. I was a man who dealt in logic and evidence. And a few distracted evenings, a few private text messages, that wasn't evidence. It was just life. And then came the dinner. The one that changed everything. It had started innocently enough. Claire had cooked one of my favorite meals, a rich, savory beef bourguignon that she only made on special occasions. We were sitting at the dining room table, sipping wine, talking about our day. It felt normal. It felt like us. And that's when she dropped the bomb. I went out with Daniel last night, she said, her tone infuriatingly casual, but her expression different. There was a smirk playing on her lips, a glint of a challenge in her eyes. We had fun. You won't mind, right? The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The air, which a moment ago had been filled with the warm, comforting aroma of stew and red wine, suddenly felt heavy, thick, hard to breathe. I stared at her, my mind a frantic, chaotic scramble, trying to process her words. Was she joking? Was this some kind of strange, cruel test? Or was she serious? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I focused all my energy on keeping my expression neutral, on refusing to give her the reaction she was so clearly, so deliberately, trying to provoke. Right? I said finally, my voice a marvel of control, calm and even. Sounds like you had quite the evening. Her smirk widened, a small, triumphant flicker. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of a fight. Instead, I finished my wine, stood up, and walked away from the table, from her. That night, as I lay awake in bed, the space between us feeling like a vast, cold chasm, her words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, you won't mind, right? Asterisk, I didn't have all the answers yet. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If she thought she could shatter my trust, my peace, and just walk away unscathed, she had no idea who she was dealing with. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because while she thought she was holding all the cards, I was already planning my next move. The morning after Claire's bombshell over dinner, I woke up with a weight on my chest that felt almost unbearable. The memory of her words was a splinter in my mind, sharp and relentless. Asterisk, I went out with Daniel last night. We had fun. You won't mind, right? Asterisk, what did she mean by fun? The smirk on her face replayed in my head, a cruel, mocking loop. Was it just dinner? Drinks? Or something else entirely? I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been testing me, daring me to react, to question her. But I hadn't given her the satisfaction. I had stayed calm, silent. And now, that silence was deafening. As I sat at the kitchen table, nursing my coffee and staring blankly at the morning newspaper, I heard her footsteps behind me. She moved around the kitchen with her usual easy grace, humming a soft, cheerful tune as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of our marriage. You're quiet this morning, she said, her voice light, breezy. Just thinking. I replied, my own tone carefully, deliberately neutral. Anything interesting? She asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Not yet, I said, avoiding her gaze. I could feel her watching me, as if trying to gauge my mood, to see if her little grenade had detonated. But I didn't give her anything to work with. If she wanted to play games, she would have to play them alone. By midday, my thoughts had turned to Daniel, my best friend, the man who had been my best man at my wedding, the man who had been by my side through every major milestone in my life. I couldn't reconcile the Daniel I knew, the loyal, steadfast friend, with the man Claire had so casually mentioned going out with the night before. I needed answers. But I wasn't about to storm into his office or confront him with raw, unfiltered emotion. No, this required strategy. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I made my move. I started with a phone call, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of lightness and casualness. Hey, Daniel, I said when he picked up. Got a minute? Michael, always for you, buddy, he said, his tone as cheerful, as easy, as ever. I've been swamped lately, and I realized we haven't caught up in a while, I said. How about grabbing a drink tonight? My treat. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on his end, but he quickly recovered. Sure thing. Let's meet at O'Reilly's around 7. Perfect, I said and hung up. That evening, I arrived at the bar a little early, needing time to collect my thoughts, to steel myself. As I sat nursing my beer, I ran through every possible scenario in my head. What would I say? How would he respond? Could I keep my anger in check? When Daniel walked in, all smiles and easy, confident charm, it took every ounce of my self-restraint not to show my hand. Michael, my man, he said, clapping me on the shoulder as he sat down. What's new? Not much, I said, forcing a smile. Just the usual grind. You. Oh, you know. Same old, he replied, taking a long sip of his beer. For a while, We made small talk, catching up on work and mutual friends. But as the conversation drifted, I decided to test the waters. "So, Claire mentioned you guys hung out last night," I said, my tone as casual as I could manage, my eyes watching his reaction closely. Daniel froze, just for the briefest of moments, so slight that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. "Yeah," he said, his tone careful. "She asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. It was no big deal." "No big deal, huh?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "Of course not," he said, with a nervous, slightly too loud laugh. "You know Claire. She's always been easy to talk to. She just needed to vent about some work stuff." His words were smooth, practiced, but they didn't sit right with me. There was a tension in his voice, a subtle crack in his usually unshakable confidence. As the evening went on, I kept the conversation light, pretending to accept his version of events. But inside, my suspicions only grew. Daniel had always been good at playing it cool, but tonight, he seemed off. When we parted ways, he clapped me on the back and said, "Let's do this again soon." "Yeah, absolutely," I replied, forcing another smile. But as I watched him walk away, I knew one thing for certain. Daniel wasn't telling me the whole truth. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. Claire and Daniel had crossed a line, whether they wanted to admit it or not. And if they thought I was just going to sit back and let them get away with it, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed my conversation with Daniel felt like walking through a fog. On the surface, life went on as usual. Work meetings, emails, errands. But beneath the thin veneer of routine, a storm was brewing. I couldn't shake the feeling that both Claire and Daniel were hiding something from me, something far more damaging than they wanted to admit. Claire's behavior didn't help. She seemed oddly cheerful, her interactions with me almost exaggerated in their normalcy. She cooked dinner every night. She asked about my day. She even suggested we plan a weekend getaway, something we hadn't done in years. But I wasn't fooled. Her sudden enthusiasm felt forced, like a magician's sleight of hand, meant to distract me from what was really going on. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I noticed her phone light up with a notification. She quickly picked it up, glanced at the screen, and then locked it and set it face down on the coffee table. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just Sophie," she said, without missing a beat. I just nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But my mind was already racing. Sophie was her best friend, sure. But the way Claire had rushed to hide the message, the way she had so quickly and easily deflected, didn't sit right. The next morning, while Claire was in the shower, I decided to check her phone. It wasn't something I had ever done before, and I felt a sharp, bitter pang of guilt as I picked it up. But this wasn't about paranoia. It was about finding the truth. Unfortunately, Claire was smarter than I had given her credit for. The text threads were clean. No incriminating messages in sight. If she was hiding something, she was doing a damn good job of covering her tracks. Still, I wasn't deterred. If she thought she could outsmart me, she had another thing coming. I started paying closer attention to the little things. The way her voice softened when she answered certain calls. The subtle, almost imperceptible changes in her appearance. The way she suddenly seemed to have an endless list of errands to run. Then there was Daniel. I noticed he was texting me less often, his usual barrage of jokes and memes replaced with polite, surface-level exchanges. He seemed to be keeping his distance, and that only fueled my suspicions. It wasn't long before I realized I needed help. I couldn't piece this puzzle together on my own. That's when I reached out to Lucy, a private investigator recommended by a colleague. Meeting Lucy was an eye-opening experience. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had a preternatural knack for uncovering the truth. When I explained the situation, she listened intently, taking notes as I spoke. "So, you think your wife and your best friend might be having an affair?" she asked, her tone professional but not unsympathetic. "I don't know," I admitted. "But something's going on, and I need to know what it is." Lucy just nodded. "Fair enough. I'll start by tracking their movements, see if there's any overlap outside of the usual. If there's something to find, I'll find it." Waiting for Lucy's findings was excruciating. Every moment I spent with Claire felt like a lie, a performance we were both participating in, but for entirely different reasons. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, she looked up and said, "You've been quiet lately." Everything okay? Just busy with work, I said, forcing a smile. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me a moment too long. Did she suspect I was onto her? Or was she simply trying to gauge how much I knew? When Lucy called me a week later, I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. I've got something, she said. Claire and Daniel met at a bar last night. They were there for over 2 hours. I've got photos if you want to see them. My stomach dropped. Send them over, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. When the photos arrived, they confirmed everything I had feared. There they were, sitting in a dimly lit booth, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Daniel's hand rested lightly on Claire's arm, and the way they leaned toward each other left little room for interpretation. I stared at the photos for what felt like hours, my mind swirling with a toxic, volatile mixture of anger, betrayal, and something else, something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the disrespect. They thought they could play me, thought I wouldn't notice the cracks in their facade. But they were wrong. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had done. And when I was done, they would both regret ever underestimating me. The day I decided to confront Claire and Daniel was one of those moments that felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog, while everything around me stayed sharp and clear. After seeing the photos Lucy had sent, the laughing, the casual intimacy, the way they leaned into each other, I knew I couldn't just sit quietly anymore. That morning, Claire was in the kitchen, making coffee, as if it were just another day. She was humming softly, her back to me, her movements graceful and familiar. But all I could see was the image of her and Daniel, smiling like they were the only two people in the world. Morning, she said brightly, when she noticed me. Coffee? No. Thanks, I replied, my voice steady but clipped. She turned to look at me, her brow furrowing slightly. You okay? You've been off lately. I'm fine, I said, brushing past her to grab my keys. Just a lot on my mind. It wasn't a lie. Instead of heading straight to work, I drove to Daniel's office. My plan wasn't fully formed yet, but I knew I needed to face him first. If anyone owed me answers, it was him. When I arrived, his receptionist greeted me with a smile. Mr. Davis, good to see you. Daniel's just finishing up a call. Would you like to wait in his office? Perfect. I walked into his office and took a seat, trying to keep my composure. The desk was immaculate, not a single paper out of place. A framed photo of the two of us, from a college reunion, sat proudly in the corner. It was ironic, really, how someone could be so good at maintaining appearances, while their actions told a different story. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, his usual confident smile faltering when he saw me. Michael, he said, his voice careful. What brings you here? I stood up, holding my phone in my hand. Without a word, I opened the photo album Lucy had sent me and placed it on his desk. His eyes widened as he stared at the images. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice calm, but sharp. Daniel tried to recover, his hands raised as if to placate me. Michael, it's not what it looks like. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. That's funny, because to me, it looks like my wife and my best friend having a cozy little date night. It wasn't a date, he said quickly. She needed someone to talk to, that's all. Things have been tense between you two, and she. I cut him off. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. You crossed a line, Daniel, and you knew exactly what you were doing. He shifted uncomfortably, his usual bravado nowhere to be seen. Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. Claire and I, it's complicated. No, I said, stepping closer. It's not complicated. It's betrayal. Plain and simple. The conversation escalated from there, his excuses growing weaker, more pathetic by the second. At one point, he tried to play the victim, claiming he had been caught off guard by Claire's feelings. You expect me to believe that? I asked, my voice rising. You've been my friend for over a decade, Daniel. And you threw it all away. For what? A few drinks and some laughs. He didn't respond. His silence was more damning than any excuse he could have offered. By the time I left his office, I felt a strange and profound mix of anger and clarity. I had said what I needed to say, and for the first time, I realized that my friendship with Daniel was over. There was no coming back from this. But Claire was a different story. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had made the conscious, deliberate decision to flaunt it, to test how far she could push me. And now, it was her turn to face the consequences. When I got home that evening, she was waiting for me in the living room, her expression unreadable. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone light, but cautious. "Interesting," I said, tossing my keys onto the table. She watched me closely, as if sensing the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. "We need to talk," I said finally, my voice firm. Her smirk from the other night, the one that had haunted me for weeks, was gone, replaced by something else. Nervousness, perhaps. "Okay," she said, sitting up straighter. "What's on your mind?" I stared at her for a long, silent moment, the weight of everything hanging heavy in the air between us. "You," I said, "and the lies you've been telling me. Let's start with last night. What, exactly, did you and Daniel do?" Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "We just talked, Michael. That's all. Don't lie to me," I said, my voice sharper now. "I have photos, Claire. I know exactly where you were and how long you were there. So don't insult my intelligence by pretending it was innocent." Her silence spoke volumes. And for the first time, I saw the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was the beginning of the end, and I was ready to see it through. Claire didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her face shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, guilt, anger, and finally, a cold, hard defiance. It was that last one, that defiance, that stung the most. Not remorse, not regret, defiance. As if she still believed she could talk her way out of this. As if she was the one who had been wronged. "So you've been spying on me now?" she said, her voice sharp, accusatory. "Spying," I repeated, letting out a bitter, humorless laugh. "That's an interesting choice of words. I'd call it uncovering the truth. The truth you've been so carefully, so deliberately, hiding from me." Claire crossed her arms, her gaze narrowing. "What truth, Michael? That I had drinks with a friend? That I needed someone to talk to because you've been too busy with your own life to even notice what's going on in mine?" There it was. Her attempt to turn this around, to shift the blame, to paint me as the neglectful, oblivious husband. But I wasn't biting. "Don't you dare try to make this about me," I said, my voice steady, but cold. "This isn't about my work schedule, or how much time we've spent together. This is about you, sneaking around with Daniel. My best friend, Claire. My best friend." She flinched at the words, but quickly recovered. "It wasn't like that," she insisted, though her voice wavered, just for a moment. "You're making it sound worse than it was." "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer. "What was it exactly? What part of sitting in a dark, corner booth, with your hand on his arm, is innocent? What part of laughing at God knows what, while your husband is at home, working to keep this life that you seem to so enjoy together, is harmless?" Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in the conversation, she looked unsure, vulnerable. But just as quickly, she straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening once more. "It wasn't a big deal, Michael," she said, her tone one of practiced, almost bored, indifference. "I needed someone to vent to, and Daniel was there. That's all." I stared at her, incredulous. "You're really going to stand there and act like this was nothing?" "Because it was nothing," she snapped, her voice finally rising. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You're acting like I cheated on you. Didn't you?" I countered, my words landing like a slap in the air between us. Her face paled, and for a moment, the room felt frozen in time. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the cracks in her resolve growing wider. But instead of admitting to anything, she doubled down. "Michael, I didn't cross any lines," she said, her tone almost pleading now. "I didn't sleep with him. I didn't. But you wanted to." I interrupted, my voice quiet, but firm. "Don't lie to me, Claire. I know what I saw. And even if nothing physical happened, the emotional betrayal, that's enough." The silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Claire sank onto the couch, her hands trembling as she ran them through her hair. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the confident, carefree facade she had worn for so long. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I was just, I don't know, lonely, frustrated. I didn't know how to talk to you about how I was feeling. So you talked to him instead," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "You turned to the one person in the world you knew would hurt me the most." She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking at all." "That's obvious," I said coldly. "But here's the thing, Claire. Your actions have consequences. And right now, I'm questioning everything. Our marriage, our trust, even the kind of person I thought you were." She broke then, the tears finally spilling over as she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't know how to fix this." For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of pity for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of her betrayal. "Fixing this," I said. "That's not up to you anymore, Claire. This isn't something you can just patch over with an apology. You broke us, and I'm not sure if we can ever be whole again." I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door, her sobs echoing behind me. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay in this house, in this life, until I had figured out my next move. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was anger. There was a deep, lingering sadness. And somewhere, deep beneath it all, there was a small, sharp spark of clarity. This wasn't just about what Claire had done. It was about what I was willing to accept. And I wasn't ready to let her, or anyone else, dictate my worth. Not anymore. I left the house that night feeling like the ground beneath me had crumbled, the familiar landscape of my life suddenly foreign and treacherous. The person I thought I knew, the person I had trusted with everything, had betrayed me in the most personal, most painful way possible. And yet, Claire's tears, her pleas, her pathetic, self-serving excuses only made me angrier. Not because she had cried, but because she had still tried to downplay the damage she had done. I ended up at Josh's place, my lifelong friend who had been through every high and low with me. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and just said, "What the hell happened?" I stepped inside and sank onto his couch, burying my face in my hands. For a moment, I couldn't find the words. But then, it all came pouring out. The dinner, Claire's bombshell confession, the photos, the confrontation. Josh sat there silently, listening, his own expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. "Man," he said, "I knew Daniel was a bit of a smooth talker, but this is a whole other level." Josh offered me his spare room and a bottle of his best whiskey, both of which I accepted without hesitation. That first night away from home was strange. The silence of his apartment was unsettling, but it was a different kind of quiet, a quiet that wasn't filled with the ghost of Claire's presence, with the weight of her lies. The next morning, Josh brewed a pot of strong, black coffee and sat across from me at his kitchen table. "What's the plan, Michael?" he asked. "The plan," I repeated, staring into the dark, bitter liquid in my mug. "Yeah," he said. "You can't just let this sit. What are you going to do about Claire?" "About Daniel? I don't know," I admitted. "I'm still trying to process everything." "Well, while you're processing," Josh said, leaning forward, "let me give you some advice. Don't go back there, unless you're damn sure it's worth it. She made her choice, Michael. Now, it's time for you to make yours." Meanwhile, Claire didn't waste any time trying to reach me. She called, she texted, she even sent a long, rambling email, pouring her heart out, begging for another chance. Each message was a toxic, manipulative cocktail of apologies and justifications. She was lonely. She felt neglected. She didn't mean for things to go so far. "Michael, please, we can fix this," one text read. Asterisk, "I love you. I don't want to lose what we have." Asterisk, "But what did we really have?" That was the question I couldn't shake. Was our marriage truly as strong, as solid as I had believed? Or had it been slowly, silently, eroding for years, without me even noticing? As the days turned into weeks, I started to hear whispers, rumors, about Claire and Daniel from mutual friends. My sister, Angela, was the first to bring it up. "I ran into Sophie," she said over the phone, her voice a mixture of pity and a grim, sisterly satisfaction. "She mentioned that people at Claire's work are talking about her and Daniel. Apparently, this isn't the first time Daniel's been caught in this kind of situation." That revelation hit me like another punch to the gut. Daniel, the man I had called my best friend, my brother, wasn't just a betrayer. He was a predator. He had likely been playing this game for years, using his charm, his charisma, to manipulate the people closest to him. At the same time, Claire's social circle began to shift. Sophie, her closest friend, reached out to me, her tone cautious, hesitant. "I don't know what's going on between you and Claire," she said, "but she's been acting different lately. Distant. Secretive." And now, People are starting to talk. Talk about what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. About her and Daniel, Sophie admitted. I don't want to get involved. But you deserve to know that this isn't just a one-time thing. People have noticed them together, outside of work. The fallout wasn't just social, it was personal. Friends who had once celebrated our relationship now chose sides. Some defended Claire, arguing that I must have neglected her for her to stray. Others stood by me, disgusted by both her betrayal and Daniel's. Josh, as always, was blunt. Anyone who takes her side, he said, doesn't deserve to be in your life. Angela, meanwhile, took it a step further. She didn't just betray you, Michael, she said. She humiliated you. And Daniel, he's trash. Cut them both out, and don't look back. Despite the support, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wasn't just dealing with the end of a marriage. I was grappling with the loss of trust, of stability, of the future I had so carefully, so logically, planned. But as I sat in Josh's apartment one evening, staring out the window at the city lights, I realized something. I wasn't powerless. I had the ability to take control, to rebuild, to start over. Claire and Daniel had taken enough from me. They wouldn't take my future, too. The next step was clear. It was time to move forward, with or without her. As word of my crumbling marriage spread, the division among our friends and family became painfully, unavoidable clear. It was as if someone had drawn an invisible line down the middle of our life, and people had chosen sides, without fully understanding the story. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion, whether I wanted to hear it or not. Josh, my rock, my steadfast ally through all of this, had no patience for anyone who dared to defend Claire or Daniel. He wasn't shy about voicing his opinion, either. Michael, he said one night, a beer in his hand, his voice a low, angry rumble. Anyone who tries to justify what they did isn't worth your time. Period. They don't see the betrayal because they've never been blindsided like this. I couldn't argue with him. Josh had been unwavering in his support, but his loyalty also brought a certain fire to our conversations. He wanted me to cut ties, to scorch the earth, with anyone who even remotely hinted at siding with Claire. On the other side of the spectrum was Claire's sister, Rachel. She called me unexpectedly one afternoon, her voice careful, measured, as if she were stepping onto a fragile, cracking bridge. Michael, I know you're hurting, she began. But Claire's been struggling, too. She made a mistake, a big one. But she's not a bad person. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my own voice steady. Rachel, you don't get it. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A repeated, deliberate choice to betray me. I know, she said softly. I'm not excusing her. I don't want to see you two throw everything away, without even trying to fix it. Her words lingered with me long after the call had ended. Fixing it. Was that even possible? Our mutual friends were the trickiest. Some reached out to show their support, while others, the ones who had always been a little closer to Claire, tried to stay neutral, as if their silence was some kind of noble, diplomatic gesture. But there were a few who shocked me with their takes. You know, Michael, one friend, a man I had known for years, said over drinks one night. Maybe Claire acted out because she felt neglected. You're always so busy with your work. Maybe she just needed some attention. I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. So you're saying this is my fault? I asked, my voice dangerously low. No, he stammered, backpedaling. I'm just saying, you know, relationships are complicated. Maybe she didn't know how to communicate what she was missing, right? I said, setting down my drink. And her solution was to find it with my best friend. He had no response, and I didn't stick around to wait for one. My sister, Angela, was a fierce, unapologetic advocate for me throughout it all. She didn't mince words when it came to Claire, or anyone who dared to defend her. Michael, you've got to cut these people out, she said, during one of our late-night phone calls. If they can't see how wrong this is, they're not worth your energy. Her bluntness was a refreshing, if sometimes harsh, antidote to the subtle, poisonous whispers of victim blaming. But then there was Sophie, Claire's best friend, who threw me for a loop. She called me one evening, her voice hesitant, cautious. Michael, I'm not defending what Claire did, she said. But I think she's genuinely remorseful. She knows she screwed up. She's been crying, nonstop, saying she'd do anything to fix this. Her words should have stirred something in me. Hope, maybe. Compassion. But they didn't. All I felt was a deep, hollow exhaustion. Sophie, I said, cutting her off. If she really wanted to fix this, she wouldn't have let it happen in the first place. The tension, the division, among our friends and family was exhausting. Everywhere I turned, it felt like someone had an opinion, a judgment, a piece of unsolicited advice. But through it all, one thing became painfully, liberatingly clear. I couldn't base my decisions on what other people thought. This was my life, my marriage, my pain. And ultimately, I was the one who had to decide what came next. No one else could do that for me. Not Josh, not Rachel, not Sophie. This was my choice. And I was finally ready to start making it. After weeks of soul-searching, of a constant, simmering anger, of sleepless, tormenting nights, I knew it was time to face Claire again. This time, there would be no shouting, no wild accusations, no futile attempts to decipher the truth from a string of half-hearted, self-serving explanations. This was about clarity. This was about closure. This was about me making my next move. I texted her. A simple, direct, 2-sentence message. Asterisk, we need to talk. Let's meet somewhere neutral tomorrow, 7 p.m. Asterisk. Her reply came almost immediately. Asterisk, of course. Name the place. Asterisk. I chose a quiet, unassuming cafe downtown, a place that had always been my sanctuary, a place where I would go to read, to think, to escape the noise of the world. It felt poetic, in a strange, bitter way, to bring the storm of my life into the one place that had always brought me peace. When I arrived, Claire was already there, sitting at a small, corner table. She looked different, worn, like the weeks apart had weighed on her as heavily as they had on me. She glanced up as I approached, offering a tentative, hesitant smile. Michael, she said softly. Claire, I replied, taking the seat across from her. For a moment, we just sat in silence, the tension between us a palpable, physical thing. She fiddled with her coffee cup, while I kept my hands firmly clasped on the table, waiting for her to speak. I'm glad you wanted to meet, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About us. About what I did. I didn't respond. I just kept my expression neutral. Let her talk. She took a deep breath and continued. I know I've hurt you, Michael. More than I can ever put into words. And I hate myself for it. I hate that I betrayed your trust, that I jeopardized everything we built together. Her voice cracked, and tears welled up in her eyes, but I remained silent. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel and I, it started as nothing, just harmless conversations. I didn't see it for what it was until it was too late. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze fixed on her. And what, exactly, was it, Claire? Be honest with me. No more excuses. She looked away, her guilt etched across her face. We kissed, she admitted. It happened more than once. But it never went further than that. I swear to you, Michael. I never slept with him. I felt a sharp, bitter pang in my chest, but I kept my composure. And you think that makes it better? I asked quietly. That it was just kissing? Claire, you didn't just betray me physically. You broke the emotional bond we had. You chose him, over me, over us, over everything we built together. Her tears spilled over, and she shook her head. I wasn't choosing him. I was lost, Michael. I felt invisible. I felt like we were living parallel lives, instead of sharing one. And Daniel, he was just there. He made me feel seen, in a way I hadn't felt in so long. That's not an excuse, I said firmly. If you felt that way, you could have come to me. You could have talked to me, told me how you were feeling. Instead, you turned to someone else. You let him come between us. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I should have handled things differently, but I want to make it right, Michael. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, just give me another chance. For the first time, I let the silence linger, allowing her words to hang in the air between us. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the raw, pleading emotion in her voice. But I could also feel the weight of her betrayal, the cracks in my trust that no apology, no matter how sincere, could mend. I've thought about this a lot, I said finally, my voice steady. And the truth is, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. What we had, it's gone, Claire. You destroyed it, the moment you crossed that line with Daniel. She reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it on mine. Michael, please, she begged. Don't give up on us. We can rebuild. I'll do whatever it takes. I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. This isn't just about rebuilding, Claire. It's about respect, about trust, about the very foundation of our relationship. And right now, that foundation is shattered. Her sobs were quiet, but heart-wrenching, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity for her. But pity wasn't enough to save us. I need to move on, I said, standing up. And so do you. I hope you figure out what you're looking for, Claire. But it's not with me. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was grief for what I had lost. There was relief for the decision I had finally made. And there was a faint, fragile glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned for my marriage, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. The days after my final conversation with Claire were oddly quiet, almost serene. The decision had been made. The divorce papers were filed. There was no going back now. Still, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all, the loss of what once was, the betrayal that had forced my hand, and the vast, terrifying uncertainty of what lay ahead. Claire, for her part, didn't give up easily. She sent me messages, emails, even a long, handwritten letter that arrived in the mail one rainy afternoon. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope for what felt like hours before finally opening it. Her words were raw, emotional, full of a desperate, belated regret. She admitted that she had been selfish, that she had let her own insecurities and frustrations push her into making a series of catastrophic decisions that had shattered our trust. I don't expect you to forgive me, Michael. Asterisk, she wrote. Asterisk, but I hope, one day, you can understand why I made the mistakes I did. I will regret losing you for the rest of my life. Asterisk. The letter stayed on my kitchen table for days. I didn't respond. What could I say? The damage was done, and no amount of apologies, no matter how sincere, could undo it. While I was slowly, deliberately, picking up the pieces of my life, Claire's world was crumbling. Word about her affair with Daniel had spread quickly, and her professional reputation, the thing she had valued so highly, took a significant hit. Clients began to distance themselves, wary of the drama that seemed to follow her. As for Daniel, his charm had finally run its course. Mutual friends who had once idolized him, who had been a part of our shared life, turned their backs on him when they learned of his betrayal. He lost business deals, social connections, and ultimately, the respect of those who had once admired him. From what I heard, through the inevitable whispers of the grapevine, Claire and Daniel didn't last long. Whatever spark they thought they had, it fizzled out under the harsh, unforgiving light of reality. Daniel, unsurprisingly, moved on to someone else, another coworker. And Claire was left to face the consequences of her choices alone. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. Watching their lives unravel didn't erase the pain, or make me feel any better about what had happened. If anything, it only reinforced the sense of loss that lingered in the background of my everyday life. But I refused to let their mistakes define me. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life, one small, deliberate step at a time. I started therapy, something I had never considered before. My therapist, a calm and insightful woman named Dr. Bennett, helped me unpack the betrayal and find a measure of clarity amidst the chaos. She reminded me that Claire's actions didn't reflect my own worth, and that healing would take time, but that it was entirely possible. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted away from during my marriage. Friday nights became about beer and laughter at Josh's place, or poker games with a group of guys I hadn't seen in years. Bit by bit, I started to feel like myself again. One afternoon, as I was organizing my new, smaller apartment, I came across an old photo album Claire and I had put together during our first year of marriage. Flipping through the pages, I felt a pang of sadness, but also a strange, quiet sense of peace. Those memories were real, even if they were overshadowed by what had come later. And while the marriage didn't last, it had shaped me into the person I was now, someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. I closed the album and placed it on a high shelf. It was a part of my past, but it didn't have to define my future. As I stood there, looking out the window at the city skyline, I felt a small, quiet flicker of hope. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning. Again, on my own terms. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. The day my divorce was finalized, I walked out of the sterile, impersonal courthouse with a mixture of emotions I could barely describe. There was relief, certainly. A profound, physical sense of a heavy weight being lifted from my shoulders. The chapter of betrayal and heartbreak was officially, legally, closed. But there was also a deep, lingering sadness, a hollow ache for what could have been, for the life we had planned together, a life that was now just a collection of memories and paperwork. As I stepped out into the bright, unforgiving sunlight, I took a deep, clean breath, letting the fresh air fill my lungs. It felt like a small, symbolic gesture, the start of something new, even if I didn't know what that something was yet. In the weeks and months that followed, I focused on rediscovering myself. For so long, my identity had been inextricably tied to being Michael, Claire's husband, to being one half of a seemingly perfect couple. Now I was just Michael, and that was enough. Therapy helped me to confront the deep, jagged scars left by the betrayal. Dr. Bennett encouraged me to embrace the things that made me happy, no matter how small or insignificant they seemed. I returned to running, hitting the trails at dawn, when the world was quiet and still. There was something cathartic about the steady, rhythmic pounding of my feet on the ground, the even beat of my heart, the simple, undeniable act of moving forward. I also picked up my photography again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. It started with a second-hand camera I found at a thrift store, and soon, I was spending my weekends exploring the city, capturing moments of unexpected beauty in the ordinary. Sunlight streaming through a dusty window, a child laughing in a park, the intricate, weathered details of an old, forgotten brick wall. It was during one of these weekend excursions that I met Hannah. She was leading a community art walk, her enthusiasm infectious as she explained the stories behind the murals and sculptures that were scattered throughout our neighborhood. I was struck by her warmth, her genuine, unpretentious interest in connecting with people, with the world around her. At the end of the walk, as the group began to disperse, I found myself lingering, wanting to talk to her more. "You have a good eye," she said, nodding toward the camera that was slung over my shoulder. "Thanks," I replied, a small, unforced smile on my face. "It's a work in progress." "Aren't we all?" she said with a grin. Our conversation was easy, flowing naturally from art, to books, to travel. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't thinking about Claire or Daniel or the messy, painful wreckage they had left behind. I was simply in the moment, enjoying the company of someone new. Over the next few weeks, Hannah and I began to spend more time together. She introduced me to her favorite hiking trails, and I showed her my favorite hidden coffee shops. Our connection was quiet, but undeniable, built on a foundation of shared interests and a mutual respect for each other's journeys. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, the lights a glittering, distant carpet below, I told her about Claire. About the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the long, slow, painful road to finding myself again. I expected her to look uncomfortable, to maybe even pull away. Instead, she reached out and took my hand. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said softly. "It's brave to be so honest about your pain. It means you're ready to heal." Her words stayed with me long after that night. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was living again. Looking back, I realized that Claire's betrayal, as devastating as it had also been a turning point. It had forced me to confront my own worth, to let go of a relationship that had been built on a fragile, crumbling foundation, and to rediscover a strength I didn't even know I had. Hannah wasn't a replacement for what I had lost. She was proof that life could, and would, move forward. That new connections could be forged, and that happiness could be found in the most unexpected of places. As we walked back to the car that night, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of possibility. And for the first time in a very long time, I was ready to embrace it.